We have here verse 38 of the 10th chapter, Gospel of John. Jesus has provoked a bit of a firestorm when he declared, "I and the Father are one." And while certain scholars have attempted to avoid the facial sense of that Jesus was claiming to be one with the Father substantively, a kind of Trinitarian idea, nevertheless, that's certainly the way the people who heard him say it originally took it. And for that reason, they were prepared to accuse him of blasphemy, and they began to take up stones to stone him for that particular offense. And Jesus, of course, asking them what good work did he perform that would lead them to try to carry out his execution, and they frankly acknowledged it wasn't for the good works that he was doing, but for this claim he made that made himself, at least apparently, from their point of view, equal with God. And so Jesus now points once again to these works that he's doing and indicates to them that, look, if the works that I'm doing are the kinds of works that could only come from heaven, could only come from God, then in some way or other you're put in the position of having to take seriously what I say. The works I do become the attesting proof to the truth of that which I declare. And now he drives that argument a little further along here as we have verse 38a. This is the word for if, takes the indicative. So if, da, the soft conjunction poio, contraction of, or it's the contract verb rather, I should say. Poieo, I make or I do. And this is the first person singular, present active indicative. But if I do, and impliedly he's referring to the preceding verse, meaning if I'm doing the works of God, then kan, it's a contraction of the two words kai and aeon, if. Aeon, which takes the subjunctive, and we find the subjunctive out here. So it's generally translated by something like though, even though, something like that. So if I do them, even though the idea emoi, the dative singular of the personal pronoun, so even though you do not may is used with non-indicative moods, which is what we have here. We have the subjunctive. So even if I do them, even though you don't believe me, is the idea, then he carries it on. Tois, the article, dative, plural, masculine, or I should say a neuter here, would be the same spelling. Tois ergois, the works. So even if you don't believe me, the works pistueta. You should believe those. You may not believe something simply because I said it, but when you find me doing works that accompany my statements, then you're put in the position of having to take seriously the words that I say, because this becomes the attestation of the truthfulness of what I'm saying from heaven. And so the works believe, and if you do that, hina takes the subjunctive, then you will. So believe them, so that is the idea. And then a very interesting construction, we have gnota and genosketa. Same word, of course. Both of these are based on the word gnosko, which has to do with knowing something, usually knowing something personally or knowing it well. What we have here is the aorist subjunctive and the present subjunctive. So it's the second person plural, aorist, and then followed by the present subjunctive. And it is rather an interesting kind of construction here, somewhat unusual, but the idea, the aorist, of course, would suggest more a point in time. The present would suggest more ongoing time. So believe the works so that you can come to know and continue to know is the idea, very forceful idea. That, hoti, and then of course what we have is really a repetition of what he said earlier, that in emoi, in me, ho pater, impliedly is, that in me the Father is, and I in the Father am. If you will believe the works, then you must believe the words. And if you believe the words, then you're going to understand that I and the Father am one. which is the same thing as saying, I am in the Father is in me, we are united together. There's a substantive connection between us. It's one of the many occasions in the book Gospel of John, as well as the rest of the New Testament, in which any fair construction of the words we find here could only lead us to the conclusion that Jesus is in fact claiming nothing less than deity, and that of course becomes the traditional justification for the Christian doctrine of Trinity.